Welcome to the fifth Cheryl Reeve Show, part of the TalkNorth.com podcast network. Cheryl, I've been running all over town today. I was at the Wild press conference. Before that, I was talking to Dave St. Peter with the Twins. And you had told me that you went over and visited with them, and you made it sound like you were seeking information. Dave said they invited you to speak, and they were blown away by your speech. I'm getting two different versions of the truth here.
Well, I'm always going over there trying to get information. Okay. I feel, so fortunate to be able to have some of the quality relationships that I do, particularly with the Twins organization. It started with Laura Day, who's one of their top executives who became a Lynx fan. And so we've just kind of shared through the years, just back and forth, being able to go over to enjoy a game or two and interact with their staff. And then, I think it was one of the last dunkers I attended, the morning breakfast over there. It was Thad who was in attendance, and he and I were talking. And
Thad can talk.
Yeah, I love it. I love being around Thad. He's hilarious. And he said, hey, if you ever want to, pop over. And I think I went the next day. I said, absolutely. And so I just trying to pick their brains and then, so just information sharing.
Interesting stuff. We had a great time at Free House last week. We were planning on doing a 5:00 show. Traffic was not allowing for that. The great thing about podcasts, we don't have to start a certain time. Right. So we kind of pushed it back, let people show up. We had a nice crowd there. It's a great venue for doing this. We loved it. Thank you to the Free House for having us. Next show is June 11th. We're going to start at 6:00. That's probably going to be a little more conducive to traffic and everything else. We saw a lot of familiar faces at the first podcast. We'd like a lot of new faces to show up next time. We will give away apparel, and we will take live questions again. I really love the way that show went. Thanks again to Free House. And we'll tell you more about Free House later, but let's get to game one. You had a great ceremony. It was a blast.
Yeah.
You had great entertainment, great halftime show. The game itself wasn't quite what you were expecting, I don't think.
It wasn't, but I think realistically when you step away from it and kind of look back in on, the 3 weeks of our training camp and the ways that we're pulled in all different directions, and whether it's, Maya, doing things off the court, with the Jordan brand that we saw show itself. Everybody has stuff, and that's the great thing about this team is that we are in demand. And then, when your families come into town and, there's a lot of distractions, a lot of things that could keep you from the task at hand. And it seemed like it might have played a part, which, I'm not an excuse maker. I don't care what it is. We should be able to, but we just, for whatever reason, we just didn't have our very best stuff. It's a game that, we'll look back on and not feel very good about, but, it's one of 34, it was not for the championship. And we have to move on. We got to learn from it. I'm not a big believer in just ignoring it. We have to, see some of the trends maybe that showed themselves in the game that we've been seeing in training camp, and address them and make sure that in game two that we start to clean things up.
One of the reasons you're good at this is you're blunt. You don't measure your words. You just say what you think. And you were blunt in the post-game press conference, saying, "Hey, basically your theme was we were terrible today, and that's the way it is." I've covered other people who would kind of use the media to send a message to their players. And I was curious, are you doing that at all, or are you just speaking your mind?
Well, I always say I'm not smart enough to think about, hey, if I do this right now, maybe that I'm just not smart enough for that. I only know one way, and, you get me close enough to the game time, you're going to get very raw emotions from it, both good and bad. And I've been doing that for years. I think in 2010, my first year here, we got beat by 30 at home to Indiana, and I go into the press conference and I say, we are a bad basketball team. And we had a sponsor that called up and said, well, why would I sponsor the team if they're a bad basketball team? And so the business staff goes, don't do that, Cheryl. Don't, I just don't know any other way. And, like you said, call it like you see it. And I mean, I'm not trying to, I love our players, and I love the way we do things. And, there's just sometimes that we don't play well. And, it's not an indictment, of them individually, but in terms of that collective effort, it was not our very best. And I don't know the reasons for it. Just didn't happen. And LA got the W.
I will say that the times have been around where you could tell, sometimes you can just tell a coach or manager is trying to get a message to their players through the media. And sometimes I would actually have people tell me, hey, I said that because of this. It's amazing how often I'd have, especially when I was a beat writer, I knew the players extremely well, especially with the Twins. I'd have players come up to me and say, what was he trying to say? It was like, it becomes this game of telephone.
Yeah.
It doesn't work very well.
It doesn't. And like I said, that never crosses my mind. I am somebody that I like to listen to what our players have to say, not because I believe they're sending messages, but it gives me a good idea of where we are. So I do like to listen to all the interviews and, hear tones of voices, and just how strongly they feel about something, and maybe I miss something. So for me, it's just more collecting information as opposed to, hey, is somebody sending me a message? No, this group just has not done that.
Maya Moore had a large, and I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but it appeared to be a massive billboard or painting on the side of a building. And it was entitled Wings. It was kind of an homage to the old Michael Jordan poster. What does it mean to you, the franchise, Maya, to be displayed like that?
Well, it's so iconic. The magnitude of it, the way that it just kind of took the city by storm, so to speak. It was just like all of a sudden it was there, and then that image, that we've come to know to be Maya, just a real credit to the Jordan brand. I think in the way that they did it, anything that Maya's involved in is going to be first class and have excellence to it, and that certainly displayed that. And then, when I just think about the impact that something like that has on all of us in growing women in sport and how we view women in sport, tremendous exposure. That's Jordan Brand being committed to a female athlete to advance themselves professionally. To see the pictures that came from it, little girls standing in front of it. It just makes you think about when those young girls, they have this picture now, they're going to have it in their bedroom for however long. And when they grow up, they're going to say, I remember when I was a kid, I had this Maya Moore, rather than us saying we had a Michael Jordan poster, now we have a Maya Moore, image in our head. And that allows these young girls to dream. And maybe one of those little girls is going to be the next Maya Moore.
And in conjunction with all of that, ESPN did release some numbers. They said the viewership of the opener was up 38% over last year. I remember when the U.S. women's soccer team was the talk of the nation, and we were all like, okay, this is the start of a new wave, and it didn't quite happen. But you never know when it's going to happen. It almost feels to me like we are at the beginning of something that's changing now, where your ratings are going up. I think the messaging that you have used and other women's sports leaders have used, it feels like we're at a point in our society where people are ready to hear it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's largely the feedback we've gotten, just the number of people that are saying, it's not just the ones that already know, the preaching to the choir. It's more of, you can kind of sense, like you said, like a sea of change where maybe the change is there's maybe the antiquated mindset. People are now retiring from their positions, and there's been a change of guard. I think that certainly has helped. But then I just think also people just starting to be more open-minded, to the idea that, maybe we have been, a little biased against women in sport. It takes, bold movement, to really enact change. And, when I think about ESPN and their commitment, the long-term TV deal for any league is something that helps the league to be viable. Continuing to grow that, will be important. Well, how do you do that? When they put us on air, show them that people want to see it. The old, tired, antiquated, nobody cares about women's sports simply isn't true. No one is saying that the interest is exactly the same as it is for the NFL or the NBA. Nobody's saying that. They're saying that the interest is much greater than what the coverage is demonstrating. And I think we're seeing that as coverage increases and you're seeing people, more clicks, more views, whatever it is. And you start to go, maybe there is something here. Maybe there is an underserved market. And, I think that if you look at the start of the NBA, not back in the 50s, but it was in the late 70s when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came onto the scene. It was their rivalry that really catapulted the NBA into a different time, Well, maybe LA and Minnesota are that catalyst for the WNBA, possibly. Can we build on this momentum? And, it's incredibly exhausting. I don't know how they feel, but, just playing them, it's just incredibly exhausting, all that goes into it. And made for TV, right? That, we're getting our rings and raising the banner and we're playing the team that we just beat and they're stewing about it and they can't wait to play us. They don't care who's on the floor. They're going to, it's Minnesota. It could be, they had no post players, whatever the situation was, they were going to, put up a darn good fight. And obviously they did. And then, the gut punch of the game winner, in the last second.
More on that topic and Lindsay Whalen shoving people, which is, I loved. That was kind of fun to watch. After we thank Free House, it is the large, I can't just call it a restaurant, can't just call it a brewery. It is a large open space with a beautiful patio, great bar area, which is where we were situated when we did the show last week, and a large restaurant space that they have kind of everything going on over there. They make their own beer. Cheryl might have tasted a few of them.
I did. Shout out to Matt, the brewmaster, yes, who hooked me up with a flight, and I didn't give a chance to give him feedback on all. I didn't love all of them. I loved a couple of them. I should have let him know which ones, and maybe he could tweak the flight next time.
I know my wife loves the Kolsch, which I think is one of their most popular. Of course, they do the IPAs. They also do experimental beers. I think what was Blueberry Blonde?
Yes.
I hate having celiac disease. I can't just go through and taste all of these. So you're going to have to be my test taster.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to do that for me.
Yeah.
They also have Tito's vodka, so I can always enjoy myself there. Thanks to Steph Shimp and Blue Plate and everybody else with the company for sponsoring this show. If you'd like to sponsor the show, send me an email, JSOUHAN 47, the numbers 47 at gmail.com. I think the show's going to be a big hit. You might want to get in early. And you told me you go over to Free House like for breakfast, right?
I do, yeah. It's a little bit harder in season once we start our schedule, but in the off season, I enjoy just getting away. Sometimes it's hard to come into the office and get any work done, so when I really want to hunker down as we prepare for the draft, or I'll sit there all morning, my server will know, it's just keep the iced teas coming, I'm going to eat and then I'm just going to hang out. And I've met a lot of great people over there, when they have business meetings there, so just a great environment, it changes throughout the day into the, becomes the happy hour and, the patio crew and just a really great place.
It is. North Loop right there on Washington. We highly recommend the place. So, it's a podcast. Is that me? Oh, it's me. I'm having phone troubles. My apologies to our listeners. My phone might do anything during this show as I try to get control back from it. Whalen goes through the first round of interviews after the game, and you just tell she's just steaming. Mm-hmm. She's just ticked, Mm-hmm. And, later on I caught up with her and had a nice conversation with her, but you could just see the competitor in her. It's like, I know it's my job to answer these questions. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be professional about it, but man, I want to punch somebody. She got a little physical in that game. That was a little heated.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, that's just the nature of this rivalry.
Like you said, competitors and the occasion where Odyssey Sims, dribbled in front of her bench to call a timeout, and Lindsay was kind of staying in the play, making it difficult to do such a thing, which is what they're coached to do. And then they both attempt to walk in the same path, and neither was going to back down. So yeah, it led to just what you expect. Like you said, there's a healthy that competitive fight that exists in all of us when we're playing each other. So so it's I always say it's vintage Lindsay Whalen. She's not going to let her team back down from anybody for any reason, and she willed us in that game. She gave us a chance. So I suspect by the time we got to the end, she was, I'm sure, pretty exhausted. The play that she put forth there at the end put us in position to win. And then I think, there's been, I think, 5 buzzer beaters between these two teams in the last 2 years. They've gotten 4 of them. We have 1. We hurt them in L.A. during the I think the stretch run where we both were undefeated, and Renee Montgomery hit a corner 3, and but they have 4. Started with Elena Beard in Game 1 in 2016 in the right corner that she nailed, and then the NECA shot to win the championship, and then Chelsea Gray in the Game 1 again, and then obviously this last one. So it's tough.